Thanks for staying with us. Now, they exited plum government jobs to plunge into the murky world of politics. A world where rules of the game aren't necessarily rules, except for one, that constant of the jungle. It is survival for the fittest. So what have they just gotten through, and how was the baptism by fire that is Kenya's legendary chaotic party primaries? From cabinet to politics, what has been their experience so far? Joining me in studio, former Cabinet Secretary Sicily Kariuki and Adan Mohamed are live on Newsnight. To the both of you, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And let me start with a question many Kenyans asked when you resigned. You left sure jobs in search of political jobs. The sure jobs certain, at least until August. The political ones, not so certain. Sicily Kariuki, I'll start with you. Why?
Well, personally, I had served and gained experience, which I felt it was time for me to serve at a different level. And so for me, it was not from one job to another job. It was indeed after a sustained, assured job to one of service to the people of Nyandarua.
And that was your motivation. For you, Adan, any similar sentiments?
Well, I think we were coming to an end of a 2-year term as a cabinet minister. And that term coming to an end, one has to think about next steps in life. And so that is what informed my decision to get into this specific political engagement.
And as you were making that decision, what were your expectations about the political engagement? What were your expectations and what was the reality that you then found on the ground?
Well, I think it's fair to say that throughout my, both private sector work as well as public sector life, transitions do happen for different reasons. In some cases, you're forced to exit. In others, you make the decision yourself. And people do that for different reasons. And for me, specifically, I realized that, during my private sector life, I've done a lot for shareholders of the companies for which I've worked. And I think I have done an extremely good job and made a lot of people rich. And the 10 years in cabinet has also been a wonderful experience. And I dare say that one is not complete without having the opportunity to have seen both sides of private as well as public sector life. But even then, I think the cabinet position has been a bit, shielded, so to speak, from the realities of real politics. And that's why I think it's interesting to see what happens, the road ahead. Expectations are you go into it wanting to make a difference in the lives of people who you intend to serve. But how easy that will be is for a different time. I think once we get in there, call me another time and I will share my experience.
No, I'll want to dig a bit deeper, but let's come back to that. Let me allow Sicily to also weigh in on this, because after leaving a sure job instead of a political job, and she surprised some Kenyans with that, she then surprised Kenyans just the other day when she announced that she was dropping her bid. Is the elephant in the room? And I'll ask you to clarify now, why did you do that? World and decisions that you make are informed of the obtaining situations. The time I left cabinet to go and vie for the gubernatorial seat in Nyandarua, I was very clear that my executive experience acquired over 3 decades would resonate very loudly to the people of Nyandarua who are yearning for a change. And indeed it did. And I really must thank my supporters and the people of Nyandarua because they embraced me wholeheartedly. I found favor and support and acceptance in sports that I never expected before. And because they were at a point where they wanted to make a decision to move on with a different kind of leadership. But having said that, we got, I think Nyandarua became one that will go down in history books in terms of then what was happening by 2 of us going for the Jubilee ticket. That is the incumbent and myself. And because when I left government, I was very, very clear the party that I was going to be running on. And if that was to happen today, I will do the same. It's going to be Jubilee. And why? Because it is a party that I have been used to in terms of serving government. It's a government party. But importantly, it's a party that's going to bring the mountain people, you know, around a party that they can call home. And therefore, I did that very, very conscious that that is the reason I picked that. However, having gotten there, it became somewhat difficult to make a determination and decide whether we wanted to continue struggling with a stalemate, the two of us, whether we wanted to have the baby split at the middle, as the parable in the Bible goes, or I needed to go above that to be able to be a leader that carries a vision. They say politics is about positions. Leadership is about vision. And so my vision doesn't die for the people of Nyandarua, and that is why I said I have postponed this one, because I didn't wish, like the mother whose child had died and was claiming the other child, to say split at the middle. And so adaptive leadership that I've been exposed to also teaches me, depending on the situation, you're going to rise above it, below it, or you just continue fighting.
So you've used I believe it's the Bible story, the Solomonic story.
That is Solomonic story.
Of two women who came before King Solomon.
Indeed.
Who played the role of King Solomon this time? And was it President Uhuru Kenyatta?
Common sense, including family.
Okay.
Common sense and a lot of family consultation, a lot of consultation with the people that believe in my vision and my leadership, a lot of the people who are close enough to be trusted, that they were not under influence. And, you know, I did, the last 2 weeks have been a lot of, if you will, consultation with people who you can trust. They'll take the bullet for me, and I'll listen to them, and I'll say, look, you live to fight another day.
So that's your plan? Now, not now, but maybe next time.
Yes, because Wahiga, I'd like you to look at it this way. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been struggling to demonstrate as a leader what unity and peace can do to a country. Hence the handshake he got into with the former Prime Minister. Now, our continued taking hard positions would have meant for us, one, I am a poor student of what peace can do in matters development, but importantly, that the people had endorsed me. Patiently, they would wait upon a second chance. But beyond that, I am a student of leadership, not politics. And therefore, I made that decision very, very conscious. There are few people got disappointed. A lot of my supporters actually did get disappointed.
I was about to ask about them, but we will come back and we'll talk a bit about them, because, you know, many of them had possibly hinged their hopes on you. But for Adan, coming back to you, you may have gotten the Jubilee ticket, the gubernatorial one for Mandera, but your competitors are, some of them at least, are not happy. In fact, some of them, I think, did a press conference today. They are aggrieved and they want to support your opponent. So what does the journey look like moving forward with that in mind, that in this whole party primaries business, there are those who live with wounds and are now keen to ensure that maybe you don't see your political goal?
Well, one thing I have learned in the last 3 months since I have been active in this business, so to speak, is that every day there's a new surprise. And I think one of my former colleagues, who is now a governor herself, said to me once, if you see somebody called Mheshimiwa, you must respect that person. Because the road to get there is quite murky, it's quite convoluted. And today people are with you, supporting you. The following day you hear they have moved to your opponent. And so it's not a surprise entirely to see some of my competitors supporting other people. But also one of the things that I have been told and I have experienced is patience pays. And we just need to engage more people and share with people what your dreams are and aspirations. And maybe not now, but in the next 3 months before the elections, we hope to persuade as many people as possible to come along and join us in our route to make it to the gubernatorial position.
Let's talk about a style of politics that has proven popular in Mandera and a couple of other counties as well, the negotiate democracy, where clans sit together, make a decision, and decide who will be their leaders moving forward way in advance, before voting day, for example. Did that play any role in what's happening in Mandera right now, or is the situation changing?
I think, first of all, generally people tend to coalesce around a specific objective, including identifying leaders naturally in times of crisis. When there is a problem, when they feel insecure, when they feel that there are territorial threats and so on and so forth. But when there's no crisis, then things tend to be normal, and as many people as possible tend to throw their names in the ring, like we have seen. I mean, before I came into this studio, there were 47 presidential candidates, and now in the last half an hour, now there are 55, I hear. So I think there is a role for negotiations and consultations, but generally the demographics of voters tend to be now much more youthful, younger people who understand what difference people can make in their lives, as opposed to the traditional, you come from this side or this clan or that clan. And so personally, I feel unless there are crises which could, pull people together to do certain things, generally people will now be much more influenced through the democratic process, where every voter is given a chance to play a part in choosing their leaders.
It almost sounds like you support a democratic process over a clan-negotiated process. Is that your personal preference?
I think there is a role, I said, for that. There is an input that can be made. But generally, communities have different reasons. And the problem with having some of those clan dynamics is there could be an assumption that it could be this clan to produce this person this time, but they may not have the best person at the time. And so you end up actually denying the citizens or, the constituents or the country for that matter in a situation like a governor's job, the most appropriate kind of leader. So, as I said, there was an appropriate time for that. It's transitioning. Going forward, I would see much more open, competitive, garnering for positions where the voters, which are now beginning to be much more educated, much more youthful, going to play a big part in choosing their leaders.
Okay. I'm trying to read between the lines of what you're saying. I'll come back and probe a bit more. Honorable Kariuki, coming back to you. You said you consulted widely before coming to this final decision. No one within your consultations told you if the Jubilee baby is proving hard to save, so to speak, go independent. Pick another party.
Wahiga, you want to know, right now I can't cope with my phone. All my supporters want me to move to independent. And they don't understand why I'm not even responding quickly enough. It's a choice that I made that I'm moving and sticking with Jubilee as a party. And no amount of pressure will get me to move to an independent ticket. For the simple reason that I said, and I'm happy to say this, and I want to thank the party owners or other party leaders who have offered and sent emissaries to me.
Oh, that is happening.
Over time, even when I spoke about a Jubilee ticket, I'm somewhat clear what it is I need. The party that is going to unite the people around Mount Kenya is going to be Jubilee. The party that we can call home is going to be Jubilee. The party that I have served under for the last 10 years is Jubilee. And therefore, I have a stake. And importantly, in the 3 months I've been away, I overinvested my emotions, my resources, my networks, and everything into the same party. So walking away from a party called Jubilee, it would negate the investment and the belief and the value system that I carry personally. Importantly, I see myself evolving into a role that is going to help me from tomorrow to be able to also campaign for the presidential candidate who is carrying the flag for Azimio, where Jubilee has found home. That is the Right Honorable Odinga.
So you've kind of waded into my next question. So is that your what next?
That is what I am plotting, of course, with a bit of consultation, but that looks like the most immediate one for me. The other most immediate one for me looks like I will be also supporting the Jubilee candidates within the region who are willing and happy to be supported. I'll also be looking at mentoring and holding the hands of particularly the young women who are coming into the political space for the first time. You recall I served at Minister Gender, and therefore getting involved with a bit of the 2/3 gender rule and the politicization around it, the need to also capacity build the young people coming into the space. And when I say young, I'm looking at the ladies, but I'm also looking at the young people. So those are some of the reflections which I'm having right now. But that is only after I have looped back, gone back to the county, to my supporters, to ask them for their pardon and to ask them to support me for the next journey as we prepare, to come back.
So we can see you, we expect to see you on the ground in Nyandarua, in the region, and across the country.
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely.
Okay. When we reflect on the 2010 Constitution, and this is to both of you, it changed the political system so that one would say non-politicians like yourselves were appointed to cabinet. But now you seek to play in a different role so far. And Adan, let me start with you on this one. Could that transition be a disadvantage to those who are used to coming from a completely different world, private sector? The rules are set, it's very clear. Just give us insights into what that transition has been like and whether, whereas the 2010 Constitution had a very good motive, ultimately those who are picked from private sector will then have to really fight their way through if they want to survive in the political waters.
I believe there is a very, very strong rationale and need for private sector practitioners to play a role in government. And there are countries, especially Southeast Asian countries, where actually some of the most talented people are attracted to join government, as opposed to a lot of countries, especially in Africa, where people tend to run from government to private sector. But the knowledge, the experience, the discipline that people pick up in the experience during private sector is one of the things that really can play a part in helping governments to get things done much quicker. And Vision 2030 is a really good example. A policy program that was driven largely, initiated by the private sector practitioners, that has been the blueprint of our development plan in the last 10 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. Now, do I believe in terms of what the Constitution says about the role of cabinet ministers being non-political? I truly believe that that helps a lot because members of parliament who typically have constituencies and see their constituents as their future, as their life, so to speak.
As their priorities.
As their priority, tend to focus largely on that. Whereas people who are full-time cabinet ministers that are non-political really focus on the ministry activities and therefore don't need to be worrying about constituency issues. And so some of the things about the hybrid nature of what is proposed in BBI, for example, I think makes sense. But politicians in parliament see things from a different angle. And that has been largely around accountability by cabinet ministers who are not elected by people. And so that can be for another day. But I think the transition that I have personally had so far, which is moving from private sector to cabinet, has been fairly smooth and fairly well shielded, so to speak. I haven't had to go to public to ask for votes, to have to explain why they should elect, but now is now in a different area. And I really think this is where the challenge, but where the most impact can come out from, because you deal with multiplicity of challenges. Here you see a mother talking about medical care, another one talking about education, another one talking about roads, another one talking about something. And luckily, some of us have gathered the experience over time to see how we can actually contribute to deal with some of those challenges.
But one would say experience might not be enough. For example, we've had politicians come on the show here and say, and some of them even retired, who say that the demographic that we have now as an electorate, when you go to them and sell your vision, at the end of the day, many tell you as leaders, we are hungry. Mheshimiwa, utatuachia nini leo? How do you then deal with that from the world that you've come from?
Well, it is a reality. I agree with you. And that is why when you see a lot of crowds at rallies, everybody comes to rallies for different reasons. Some actually just want to come and hear what this person has to say. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, what really matters is your own personal conviction and your own commitment to explain to yourself, why are you getting into this? And if you think about it, there are people who are getting into this because they are unemployed, literally. And then there are those that people describe as mad people like ourselves, who are, as you describe, leaving plum jobs to actually go.
Did someone actually tell you that?
A lot of people say that. I mean, somebody has actually said, my friend, you know, dine with kings and queens, what is going on for you to go back to Mandera? But I look at the county that I want to represent now, and I look back at the time when I was going to school in that county, and nothing much has happened. Yet, the effort of the government is now shifting much more from the national government to devolved solutions. And if you want to make a difference and contribute, give it a try. And so we are not mad people. We just want to see how we can make a difference. But ultimately, the choice is for the people who need some of those services. And I really think some of the things you've mentioned about people who are given money to, you know,
it's about handouts.
Selects that. It is unfortunate, but we don't want to give up. That needs to change, because you get a leader now, you live with that leader for the next 5 years. And so we don't want people to mortgage the future of their children and their grandchildren by electing leaders who just give them today's lunch or tomorrow's dinner.
Okay.
And so that, I think, is how we see it.
That's your take on it. Honorable Kariuki, even as you come in, let's talk a bit about devolution, and you can respond to what he said, but both of you are vying because, and I guess you saw a problem in your counties. 10 years after the advent of devolution, what's the biggest issue in Nyandarua, in your view?
Thank you, Aihiga. Adan and I share history, not just in cabinet. We went to the same school in high school. We went to Kangaroo High School. And therefore, when we differ, it's not because we do not have a background.
Kangaroo people.
You know, if you visit the Leadership and Integrity Act, Section 23, cabinet secretaries and CCs are actually allowed to participate in political processes, very, very directly within the law. And so the experiences that I took out in 2017, as we were looking for the second, you know, the coming back of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, did actually give us some very political experience, particularly in the docket that I was heading at that point in time. So it's something that I have practiced. It is something that I have been rehearsing the last 3 months, and it's something that if we all sit and say, having been a cabinet minister, you shouldn't play at that other level, I think is also somewhat careless, because then we are allowing for leadership in the counties or in the devolved structures to then go to the people who do not have the requisite experience. And for me, the experience that I've gathered over the docket that I headed, youth, gender, public service, water, health, agriculture as a PS, merits for me to apply myself at the micro unit to be able then not only to practice, to plan and practice at the same time. And, you know, that pushes me. Come back to the experience of devolution in Nyandarua. I did interact, because of the docket that I headed, I interacted very, very, very intensely with the people of Nyandarua. And their priorities are cut out in terms of where service ought to have been delivered differently, ranging from water. And the mothers tell me water and water and water for the priority. I did what I was able to do in the 2 years that I was in charge of water, have a footprint of water projects all over the county. Recall I was also serving the nation, so I did not quite apply myself from a point of budget or even meeting the requirements that they had. And therefore, that to me was one of the platforms that I was going to be able to carry on, continue, because water is a concurrent function. And therefore, the county, you are as good as if you are the national level. That was done as big priority. The other priority is health. The healthcare systems, the healthcare delivery mechanisms are wanting. And I said it when I was speaking to the people quite a bit. And because of my exposure, having been to Cuba, having also been exposed to Thailand, having been exposed right here home in Makueni, it is possible we can simplify healthcare delivery to the minute dispensary and healthcare health center to be able to then meet with the needs that I have seen glaring. Quite simple to deliver, can be done, will be done. But come back to agriculture again. The county has great potential, very fertile, But what do we end up doing? Being as poor as a county that has no, fertile soils or rain. Why? Because we are unable to link production to market. We are unable to link production to, say, storage, and therefore the post-harvest waste remains as high. We are so close to Nairobi, but we have a lot of fresh produce going to waste just because there is a gap between the route to market. And therefore, having, again, experiences in my tenure in agriculture, I think it's something that merits very focused but very simple solutions to be able to bring value and to be able to leave money in the pockets of the farmers in Nyandarua.
Okay.
Number 4 is the issue of access.
Yes.
Access, road access, the feeder roads. Again, something not too complicated, because I have also seen what happens in other counties. You just want to be willing to do it. It can be done very simply.
And so those are some of the thoughts that you had as you went for this bid. I'll give Adan 1 minute to give his, I know he's still actively in the race, so I won't give him a chance to campaign on the show, but briefly, what else devolution in Mandera in your view?
Well, I think devolution, to be honest, means a lot more to counties like Mandera and those in the north than many of the other counties. And a lot has been felt, to be honest, by, the previous regime, but a lot more could have been done. A lot more could have been done. And generally, the challenges facing Kenyans across the board are fairly similar, but the situation is much more dire in some cases, and issues around healthcare, water, youth empowerment. These are all serious problems. When I talk about youth empowerment, youth problems in this country leads youth to drugs, to problems like, armed, burglary and things like that. But there, lack of youth empowerment leads to some serious insecurity issues where youth carry guns. And that is a serious problem that we need to find out ways of empowering some of these young people. And finally, the issue of the economic mainstay of people in Mandera is livestock. We have year in, year out suffered problems where people's animals and livestock decrease by 70% due to drought. And people don't want to depend on famine relief or handouts, but they want governments, their county governments, to actually help them plan a process such that people know that droughts recur every 2-3 years. And why would we subject some of these people to the problems that they encounter today, where we see people actually dying out of hunger? It is some serious misallocation of resources that we have seen. And the national government allocates resources to devolve units, but how they are applied, how much engagement of the communities that is, that we've seen, is so critical that we need to focus on 2 or 3 key areas that are relevant to the people. And for me, economic empowerment of the communities is what eradicates poverty. And you look at it in central Kenya, could be coffee, could be tea, could be something else, could be tourism in the coast, but our area would be around livestock and the value chain around livestock, whether it is water that support this livestock, whether it is value-added processing for some of this livestock, or whether it's animal husbandry to actually deal with some of these issues. That way, you would not see people actually begging or putting a lot more pressure on the national exchequer.
Let me jump in, because Asas Sheikh is asking, can CS Adan Mohamed, also known as, I'm told, Jari?
Jari, yeah.
Jari is the name on the ground. What will he do to fight devolved corruption?
Well,
that's what he feels should be a priority.
Well, it is, of course, it is a serious issue that we have seen how resources are utilized. It is the one big problem that residents of Mandera have complained about, the issue of corruption. And corruption is executed by people who are in leadership today, and we just get them out, to be honest with you. And one of the key things that we have seen is around processes of transparency and how we can actually make it easy for people to actually get tenders or procurement processes. If things are not transparent, it is a problem. And so I am fully aware of some of the things people have complained about, we've heard about, people having to pay in advance before they get contracts. Those are issues that would be #1 priorities that will come to an end once we get into office with hopefully the citizens' help.
Okay.
Now
you sound very confident, but the citizens have the final say. Honorable Kariuki, one viewer wants to know, now that both of you have seen what party primaries look like, could that be the reason why so many Kenyans are opting for the independent route?
I believe so. I believe so. Particularly if you look at where we had the UDA party, for example, doing what was viewed to be game-changing in terms of the Mchujo, yet you know the kind of fallout and the complaints which followed. And a lot of those were the first ones to try to come back towards Jubilee, and the ones who were affected and were aggrieved also did jump out to independent, a handful that I can put on my hands and count. Now, what happened in Jubilee was somewhat of, having learned from UDA, was somewhat a modified way of reaching consensus.
A hybrid of sorts.
You know, reaching consensus. And in my own case, the people, the aspirants in Nyandarua, were given a chance, first of all, to go and say, if there is more than one candidate, who do you think from the polls and the surveys that have been done stands the best chance? And there was quite some success from what I gathered then. And then the ones who could not agree really were taken all the way and subjected to even formal written interviews. And the best took it at that point in time. It's very unique to speak about the governor seat in Nyandarua. Indeed, when history is written around this transition and what is happening at this point in time, Nyandarua will be one that will go down on record because, you know, at the governor level, you have only 2 of us, and it's proving to be the most difficult because, you know, everybody thinks they are the ones who are best, you know, placed. And you know, so, but overall, without looking at my own case in Nyandarua, I think if you look across the country, the Jubilee Party did, they did a good job. They did a good job.
Will you campaign for Honorable Kimemia?
No, sorry, thank you. I won't. No, I will not.
You will not?
No, I won't.
Okay.
I won't. Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. As we wrap this up, I want to give you, both of you a last word on the workings in government and the workings in the political system. 2 different worlds, some would say. Honorable Aid, let me start with you. Finally, how would you say it? Is it 2 different environments altogether that anyone thinking about it in the future should prepare themselves for, or are there similarities?
I think leadership, exposure to different types of scenarios and environment is quite important. And getting into an elective position has got its own challenges and its own satisfaction as well, because really what we live for is how much difference can we make in the lives of people. You can all make yourself comfortable, you and your family, but really it is what the millions of people who look up to you do. What I believe is that leadership is not something you can just jump to. You must go through several processes and steps. And naturally, if you miss a step and rise too quickly to some of the top positions, you will definitely be forced to come back to that step that you have missed. And that is what we are seeing in some of the county governors today, who are extremely driven by egos and things like that. And some of us are now beginning to come back to the loop, to come to the wananchi. And I believe personally, as a person who was born in Elwak, in Mandera County, went to school, primary, secondary school there, as ordinary as any other person in Mandera. My dad was an assistant chief. I believe, having covered the journey that I have so far, I can make a wonderful difference to the lives of those people. But what is really important is also to provide inspiration to a lot of young people who would be looking at you through television screens and say, wow, this guy is a minister. But only if you tell them your story will they start getting inspired that if he has done it, he's gone to this same school, we too can. And that is really what is taking us back home. And part of my tagline of the campaign is, I am bringing talent back home.
Okay. All right. And we'll be on the lookout for that. Honorable Kariuki, what's your last word on this? For those who, you know, there's this Kenyan saying, kwa ground ni different politics versus where you came from. What's your assessment now with that 2020 hindsight that you have?
No, I mean, I've learned a great deal of how the ground responds and operates, and also is expecting. And like I did indicate that for me, it's been all surprise in the positive direction. A lot of appetite for me to actually take on the mantle and be able to lead. And it is for that reason then I take this opportunity to thank the people of Nyandarua, really, and tell them I promise I'm coming back to the ground to give direction. Because you're on halftime, but I'll be back to give direction. I know that there is appetite for change. As to whether the change would happen today or tomorrow, change is coming. And for me, it's been a real big sacrifice. I am not apologetic about the sacrifice because it's all the while. Isn't it President Mandela, who reminded us that leadership, true leadership is also about sacrifice. And therefore, when you sacrifice, your leadership texture, posture takes you a notch higher. And that is how I see myself moving, and that's why I'm looking more at the national platform now.
Have you asked this evening, were you promised any job for this big sacrifice you took?
I have not been promised no job, and it's because I never sat to negotiate, as it were. Like I was trying to paint the picture. Other candidates got into a space where they were negotiating and saying this and the other. I saw a little bit of stuff in the social media and a bit in the print media of an offer.
Has already put ambassador.
An offer in Senate.
Next to your name.
An offer in Senate. No, I mean, I don't mind carrying the title, but to tell you the truth, and for the people of Nyandarua, I didn't negotiate so that I am having a position. I do not know how my tomorrow will look like, but I also believe that there is a God in heaven who can commute and see the sacrifices that I've made, importantly, the investments that I have made for the people of Nyandarua and for the party itself. I did it with I did the sacrifice, fully aware that there was a cost to be paid. Any leadership journey without a cost, it isn't worth being a leadership journey, because then we all can fit there.
Your final statement is very weighty. Yeah. We are going to leave it at that.
Thank
you so much. Former CS, you okay with that term? Sicily Kariuki, together with former CS Adan Mohamed, joining us on Newsnight today to give their thoughts on the political space that they have been in for the last 3 months, ever since they resigned from their cabinet jobs to seek the support of Kenyans in various counties. And they've been live with us on Newsnight. Thank you for making time for us this evening, being a public holiday. And to everyone who's tuned in, thank you for tuning in. That's the state so far of the race. And remember, every Tuesday here on Newsnight, we endeavor to give you an insight into what's happening on the political front. And we will do so in the days to come as we get closer and closer to that August 9th date. On behalf of the whole team that's made this broadcast possible, thank you for tuning in. My sign language interpreter this evening has been Wilson Mushora. On behalf of everyone, thank you once again. Have a good night. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. For those of you who've been on holiday since last week, Thursday,